Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome Scott Abramson. He's a neurologist. Today's Kevin MD article is Why the Best Physicians Risk Burnout and Isolation. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, good to be here.
All right, so you've been on multiple times. Tell us what this latest article is about.
Okay, well, first of all, the title is Why the Best Physicians Are Destined to Hell. And that's an odd thing to say, right? But it is actually, this is commentary in the Jewish Bible. It says these words, and it seems peculiar, but when you think about it, it makes sense because sometimes the best physicians are the most prideful, the most arrogant. So when they don't know something, they don't realize it. And if they do realize they don't know something, their pride prevents them from asking for help. And for that reason, they fail their patients, and for that reason, they're destined to hell. And I can tell you, Kevin, there have been times in my life where I should have been asking questions to someone, but maybe I felt, intimidated. Maybe I felt I didn't want to look stupid or incompetent. I didn't ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this works in another way too, because as you know, I was active and one of the leaders in the physician communication and wellness projects at Kaiser. And it works the other way because sometimes the best physicians are sometimes the hardest working, most conscientious, and they're the ones that get most exhausted and physically and emotionally. And what do the best physicians do then? They don't reach out and ask for help. They do what they always do. They put their nose to the grindstone, they suck it up, they pay the piper because, when the going gets tough, we know what happens. So in the article, what I said was, that if you're on this journey, if you're on this pathway to be one of the best, that you're going to be the best physician destined to hell, to reach out for help, to reach out to someone, a trusted colleague, EAP, a counselor, faith community person. And the other thing I said in there, I said, and if you see one of your physician brothers and sisters heading on this path, don't let them take the journey alone. Reach out to them. And then in the closing article, I thought it was kind of clever. And I said, because friends don't let friends become the best doctors. So basically, this was about, people, docs reaching out and also reaching out to our colleagues when we see that they're going down the wrong path.
You mentioned earlier that there were times in your career where you were afraid to be vulnerable, where you felt held back from asking questions. So give us an example from your own story about times where you maybe didn't ask a question where you should have.
That happened a lot of times. And instead of, going into some of the specifics, let me just say that as physicians, we have incredible power to affect how our colleagues feel about things, about how they feel emotionally. And I remember once a young physician, he had started at Kaiser, and he said to me, I had a patient in my office, and we have this system where if someone's, you have something that you're wondering about, you can call someone on the phone while someone's in your office and get an immediate response. So that's what he did. He called this orthopedic surgeon, and he knew it wasn't an emergency, but he just didn't know what it was. And he explained the problem, and on speakerphone, the doctor says, well, you do this, this, and this. And then the doc says to him, he says, you didn't really need to call me about this patient. Next time, just Google it. Mm-hmm. Now imagine, you're sitting there with a patient in your office, and what's this patient thinking? Can she trust her doctor? And what's this doctor thinking? The next time he has a problem and call this specialist, he's going to think twice about calling it. He doesn't want to be humiliated. And what's he going to do? Then he's going to wait till the next day and Dr. Nice Guy comes on, and that guy's going to be overburdened. So it's just this chain effect that sometimes we can do so much to help our colleagues, but sometimes inadvertently we do things that just do the opposite. So it's kind of this interaction between doctors that I was so interested in.
Why do you think that medicine still carries a culture of silence around emotional and mental health struggles?
Yeah, I think, I think it's at least in my generation, we were brought up is you just suck it up. You pay the piper, just do what you're supposed to do. And we have this, I think that's why so many doctors have this, what we call, burnout, this moral injury, because our values are, that we're going to do things right all the time. And we always do things. We achieved, we produced, I had one colleague tell me that she was an APM. You know what an APM is, Kevin?
I don't. What's an APM?
Yeah, an APM is an Asian perfection machine. And you don't have to be Asian to be an Asian perfection machine. We're all brought up that way. And then when we find that in our daily life, that our actions don't match this value of being perfect and doing everything, it creates this dissonance. And we're we have difficult. The only way we know to handle that is just to work harder, put our nose to the grindstone, and that's it. We don't reach out for help.
Have you seen a cultural shift towards the end of your career with the newer physicians entering the workforce? Do they have a different mentality?
I think they do, and I think one of the things is that when I, read the blogs and letters and articles that come in, do you think people have this is you have one platform that people are able to vent, they're able to let out, and when they do that, I mean, they read other articles about people, the other docs that are struggling, and and you have this feeling like, hey, I'm not alone.
Hmm.
Even if it's something, digital or whatever, they have fellow travelers that they can relate to in this article. So that's what I think this is doing a marvelous job in that.
Why is it important for physicians not to be alone in that journey? Sometimes when they meet those obstacles or feel burnt out, why is it important for others to commiserate in other stories?
Gosh, I think it's just so important. It's the human condition. When we're feeling hurt, we want to reach out and tell others of our hurt. And when we get the response back that, hey man, it's not so bad, or maybe it's bad, but you know what? I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I'm sorry you're going through this. Gosh, it's tough. And we just to get that, number one, to be able to admit it. Number two, to express it to someone else, to get it off your chest. And number three, if you can get a response back, maybe there's no solution, but maybe the solution is just someone putting their hand on your shoulder and giving you a hug.
So you mentioned that you worked in the wellness space when you're with Kaiser. Did you ask other physicians to ask for help? Because sometimes it doesn't come naturally to them. How did you get other doctors and your colleagues to ask for help when they needed it?
That's a good question. A lot of we had a lot of programs at Kaiser. We developed a lot of programs. We had a mentorship program for one thing, a one-on-one mentorship program. We had we had offsites where people would go and some of them dealt with marriage issues, some of them dealt with burnout issues, and people could sit and discuss these things. We had Schwartz rounds, we had Ballant groups.
Hmm.
We had a lot of we developed a lot of venues where people could talk to each other, were encouraged to talk to each other.
So tell us a story where someone initially would be hesitant to ask for help or lean on their colleagues, and maybe they made that change and it appreciably helped them with their burnout in the profession. Is there a story, a positive story that you could share about a physician who has course corrected?
Well, gosh, there's so many stories, Karen. Let me tell you one. So there was this physician. He's a cardiologist. He'd been at Kaiser for about 30 years. But I was talking to him. He says, when I first joined Kaiser, he says I was like a lot of doctors. I was uncomfortable. I was unsure of myself, and I worked so hard to try to prove my worth and so forth. And he said it was tough those beginning years. But he said there was one guy. It was one guy, and it was a neurologist by the name of Sid Rosenberg. He says every time that I ran into Sid in those first few years, he would always, maybe it was in the cafeteria, in the hallway, but he'd always tell me, he said he appreciated how hard I was working. He appreciated the quality of my consults.
Hmm.
And he said, this was 30 years later. He says, it's 30 years later now, and I still feel so grateful for those words of encouragement
Mhm.
from my colleague, Dr. Rosenberg. It's sometimes a kind word and an encouragement can go so far to make a difference in one's career.
As you know, and we talk a lot on this site, the state of our healthcare system isn't making it easier for physicians, right? So tell us the type of advice you have for physicians who are currently practicing or physicians who are just entering the workforce about how they can ask for help or do the things that they could do to prevent burnout, just based on this article and your reflections.
Yeah. Well, here's one thing, and this is kind of, I guess you could say, more of a preventative thing. So I know there's a chief at Kaiser. There's a chief at Kaiser, and every so often, on a pretty regular basis, he will call one of his physicians into his office. And here's what he'll say. This is real quick. He will say, Dr. Jones, I called you into my office today. Now, you have no patient complaints against you. There's no medical legal problems. Your patient survey scores are great. The reason I called you into my office to have this personal conversation is, Dr. Jones, you are doing one hell of a job. Keep it up. And that was the end of the conversation. Just so this is sort of a proactive thing, a thing. Come on in. Let me tell you how often well, here's the other thing, Kevin, is like you don't have to be a chief to do this. The guy in the next office, you could, walk in his office and say, just want to tell you how much I appreciate all the backup that you've given me, the support you've given me. Thank you for being my colleague and my friend.
Yeah, no strings attached, right? I think just a simple interaction and encounter like that, because
Yeah,
how often is it that you get called into an administrator or a leader's office and
yeah,
it's universally something bad, something critical, patient complaint? So just a simple positive encounter without any strings attached can mean a world of difference.
that's right. And you go home that day and you tell your wife and you tell your kids, and man, it's just and you remember that, just like Dr. Ed Fisher remembered that encounter with his one of his colleagues. Yeah.
One of the things that you talked about in your article about the best physicians is that they are frequently isolated. So talk more about that and how they can find community. And you mentioned things like faith, spirituality, and community. How can they find their, let me ask you that, what are some of the things they can do, these best physicians, to feel less isolated?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna turn it on its head, Kevin, and I'm gonna say, what can we do as colleagues to help those physicians who maybe don't reach out? What
Hmm.
can we do? And again, it's sort of the same story. Is that so? One of my colleagues was, hardworking, one of the best physicians, and she was feeling broken down, beaten up, and just flat burnout. And she decided to leave Kaiser and leave medicine altogether. So on the last day she was working, a lot of us just came to her office and we told her, how much we enjoyed
Hmm.
working with a professional, how much we enjoyed knowing her personally. And at the end of that day, guess what she said? She said, if I would have known folks felt like this, I might not be leaving. And here's the thing, why is it that that our colleagues have to be beaten up, broken down, and flat burned out before we
Hmm.
tell them how much we honor them as colleagues? So it's part of it. When I said I wanted to turn it around, it's here's what we can do to our colleagues. Reach out to them. Tell them how much we appreciate them. Just, no one ever does that.
We're talking to Scott Abramson. He's a neurologist. Today's Kevin MD article is Why the Best Physicians Risk Burnout and Isolation. Scott, as always, let's end with some take home messages they want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah. Well, here's one, Kevin. And again, it's sort of the same thing. As I mentioned, we worked in physician wellness and we have a lot of programs. And one of the people on our committee was a woman named Jackie Magno Lagaska. And this woman, she's about 5 foot tall, but she is a powerhouse physically. She's a great athlete. She does this California death ride, 120-mile ride in the mountains, and she's a black belt in Taekwondo. So she decides she's going to do this project where it's called the Spartan race or something like that. And like people have to do these incredible things, they have to jump hurdles, they scale walls, they haul sandbags, they I don't know, flip tires, it's
Hmm.
this incredible thing. So we said to Jackie, he said, Jackie, this is a great thing, but this may be a little bit too tough for some of our participants, maybe and Jackie looked at us and she says, don't worry about it. Nobody gets left behind. I'll make sure of it. And if all of us, nobody gets left behind. And if all of us looked at our colleagues and we saw them if they were struggling or whatever, and we had that mindset, nobody gets left behind, especially my colleague.
Scott, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. Thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.